will be presented by Mr. Andrew Grumet. Grumet. Andrew Grumet is a attorney that deals specifically. He's going to share with us specific, unique, and creative ways how living in the United States, using the laws of this land to further philanthropy, to tap into new donors, to tap into family foundations, national-wide foundations. What are the benefits for the donors, etc.? So without further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over to Andrew, and I encourage you all to take a lot of notes. This session can bring you more shekels in your bank account, right? Absolutely. Thank you very much, Andrew.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. Today we're going to talk about the ways in which the law in the United States is created so as to help facilitate and encourage charitable giving. Most people don't normally think about the law encouraging charitable giving, but it actually does every single day. Now, it is true, the law isn't the driver for philanthropy. Statistics have said year after year, long since before I was born, that people give because they are philanthropic. Anything the law does can only enhance that. And we have a lot of different ways that the law is out there that will do that. So we're going to hit 10 ways in which the law helps facilitate grant making, okay, by donors. First of all, number one, charitable deductions, outright gifts, right? The law is what is promoting this, right? The law is encouraging us to make donations by giving us all tax benefits. The law, in effect, says you either pay your taxes and the government's going to decide where your tax dollars are going to go, or you can go and give it away and you decide. One or the other, something's going to happen, okay? Now, this little chart here kind of gives you a little overview of all the different benefits that you'll get from making a donation. But there's one I want to point out to you that's very, very important here, and that's the very first one at the top. Cash gifts. As you can see, if we make a donation in cash today, we can offset up to 60% of our income for the year. I hope everybody is donating that much. I hope every donor that you talk to, you are talking about that benefit. But what's really important to know is that that rule is going to expire next year. So at the end of 2025, you will no longer be able to offset 60% of your income. Why is this important? Well, because when the law expires, you'll be down to 15%. You're giving up 10%. That means the government gets 10% more to decide where your money should go instead of your donors. So it's important to take that into account. It's also important to make your voice heard amongst your elected representatives when next year we're talking about new tax legislation, and there will be. We're already talking about it. Every tax lawyer I know is already talking about how we're thinking about what's going to happen next year. There are a lot of expiring tax provisions. This is just one of many, okay? So to the extent this is important to you in some way, whether personally or for an organization that you're working with, make your voice heard, okay? Be part of the conversation. Number two, qualified charitable distributions. The law gives you a freebie. We call them QCDs. Just so you know, for anyone who's not familiar, anybody in philanthropy loves acronyms. If I can come up with an acronym for it, I'm going to, guaranteed, Okay? Makes me crazy. What is it? What's it all about? Let's talk very simple and plain. If you're over the age of 70 and a half, you could take money out of your IRA and give it to charity. And it's not treated as income to you. For the donors that you know who have retirement accounts, this is very beneficial. Why, you may ask yourself? Well, before we had QCDs, if you wanted to give money to charity and your largest asset was your retirement account, which is true for roughly 1/3 of all Americans, you first took money out of your retirement account, you had to report it as income, and then you can give it away. But the way tax deductions work, it's not always dollar for dollar. What if you are a modest taxpayer and you don't itemize your deductions? If you don't itemize your deductions, you don't get to claim a charitable deduction. So that means that your modest taxpayer who has a retirement account had to pay income that you just gave away. Terrible result. Okay, so we have QCDs. Very important to know. Let's move on to number 3. We got to move quickly today. We got 30 minutes and we got to hit 10 different strategies. So that's a lot. Okay. Donor advised funds. How many of you know what a donor advised fund is? Is it a 3-letter word or is it a 4-letter word? Kind of depends on your perspective. Okay. For those of you who are not as familiar with donor advised funds, it is a fictional account that's held by a public charity in which we can make donations to. We get an immediate tax deduction, and over the course of time, we make recommendations on where those funds should ultimately go. It is without a doubt today the most popular giving strategy in the US. Hands down, no questions asked. Okay. Who wants to use these? Who's this attractive for? This is for the person who says, I want my tax write-off today, but I don't know who I want to have the money. Okay? In the month of December, it is incredible how much money comes into donor advised funds every year. For 6 years, I was an outsourced CEO. I ran one of the largest donor advised fund programs in the United States. And we had a rule. During the month of December, nobody takes vacation. I don't care who you are. If that wasn't good for you, this wasn't the job for you. That's how much activity we had in the month of December. Some would say roughly 2/3 of all donations made to a charity that sponsors a program will come in starting the day after Thanksgiving. It is huge. Now, one thing that's important for you to know is that there are currently a large range of proposals out there to change donor advised funds dramatically. A few months ago, I spoke before hearings in front of Department of Treasury and Chief Counsel to the IRS in connection with the proposed regulations. We don't know exactly what is going to happen, but there is a lot of interest in further regulating donor advised funds. You may be with an organization that says, what do I care about donor advised funds? They don't apply to me. We don't have a donor advised fund program. Actually, you need to care. It's very important to care. Because under the new proposed rules, we are redefining what is a donor advised fund. And you will find that numerous charities out there that have restricted funds and other types of funds that donors have specifically given to, under the new rules, or at least the proposed rules, those funds may be treated as donor advised funds. That also means certain of your board members will be restricted from donating to these funds. All right? You should become familiar with these rules and these proposals. And once again, if this means something to you, speak to your elected representatives. We've already arranged for a significant letter to be issued to both Treasury Secretary Yellen as well as Chief Counsel. regarding these proposed regulations, indicating that these should be thrown out and we should be starting all over. Okay, but it's something to think about and be aware of. It's going to have massive, massive implications nationally. All right, let's move. Number 4. How else is the law promoting philanthropy? Well, we talked about a whole bunch of outright gifts, but what if your donor says, yes, I want to give, but I can't give it all away. I need income. I have other considerations. I have family obligations. Charitable remainder trusts. This is the strategy that maybe you ought to be thinking about. How does it work? Your donor will contribute assets, ideally appreciated assets, to a trust that they create. For some period of time, the donor and or the family will receive payments. How much? Depends. There are lots of different ways you could structure it. But at some point in time down the road, whatever's left in the trust will go to support the charity of your choosing. Simply put, your donor will get a tax deduction on day one. Not for all the money, but for part of the money. Basically, the value of what is deemed to be going to charity at the end. And the trust can diversify tax-free. So let's suppose we put in your donor or yourself, you have some highly appreciated stock. You bought Google when nobody knew what Google was. You were like my grandmother. I still remember years and years ago, I was young, she was so excited to say that she bought something called Yahoo. She just loved saying Yahoo, okay? I still remember this, okay? This is like 30 years ago, okay? She just loved telling me about it, all right? You put it in a trust, it was highly appreciated. If this type of trust sells it, there's no taxes to pay. It can reinvest tax-free, and with those tax-free proceeds, we're going to make those payments each year to the family, okay? This is why we say it's like a simulated installment sale, okay? Economically, that's what a charitable remainder trust is. Just a simulated installment sale, okay? Very valuable, okay? Special rule here, okay? You can use your QCD to fund a charitable remainder trust. Yeah. So if you've got that individual retirement account and you want to make a distribution, but you don't want to pay tax on the distribution, you can make that into your IRA. Now, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should, because let's think about this. You're limited on how much you can do from a QCD to $105,000 currently. That amount's being indexed for inflation in each year. So you have to say to yourself, do I want to create a trust for the $105,000? Even if I am going to get all the income, how much income can you possibly earn off of $105,000 on an annual basis? It's not a lot. You got to think about, does it make sense? This goes back to that old rule. Just because you could doesn't mean you should. So you got to think that through. But what if the charitable remainder trust isn't for you? All right? It's not for everybody. It's got all sorts of complications. Okay? You have to create a trust. You got to have tax returns. You probably have to call a lawyer, although not necessarily. You got to pay your accountant every year to prepare a tax return. It's a lot of work. Why don't we do it easy? Charitable gift annuities. How's that work? You're going to go to the charity of your choice. It's got to be a charity that's licensed to issue charitable gift annuities. And I'm going to go to the charity. Charity, let me buy an annuity from you. Charities can sell annuities, and they don't need to have a special license through FINRA. They're not like any of the big banks or investment firms. Okay? But you can go and buy an annuity. Call it a charitable gift annuity. We give them the money. We're going to get payments now for the rest of our lives or for some other period of time. The law is going to give you, as the buyer of a charitable gift annuity, a tax write-off. How about that? You're gonna get, you get an annuity and you get a tax write-off for that. Yes, you get a tax write-off for the remainder value of that gift annuity. It's not a bad deal. And you're gonna get an income stream. Sounds a lot like the charitable remainder trust, doesn't it? Is it the same? Kinda. Close. Okay, some important distinct benefits of that charitable gift annuity. First and foremost, it's guaranteed. Now, I don't mean guaranteed FDIC guaranteed, I don't mean guaranteed government guaranteed, but it's guaranteed because it's issued by a charity. And if you have faith in the charity and its financial wherewithal, it becomes a binding obligation of the charity. The charity can't just suddenly say, we ran out of money. In fact, actually, that is the only way you don't get paid, is if the charity goes bankrupt and literally runs out of money. You come ahead of most of the other creditors, in fact, to get paid on your charitable gift annuity. So it's not bad. Charitable remainder trust, you can run out of money, right? You're responsible for investing the money, or the trustee is. What if the trustee's bad at it? If it runs out of money, you don't get paid. Charitable gift annuity, the organization must continue to pay you, okay? On the flip side, with a charitable gift annuity, you're gonna get pretty much a fixed payment. With charitable remainder trust, you can be creative. Hire a lawyer, you can come up with all sorts of creative strategies and tactics, okay, to structure these things. But that's getting more complicated. What do you want, complication or easy? All right, a charitable gift annuity, the form, it's a 2-page document. Anybody can read that. My grandmother was able to read that. She could understand that. A charitable remainder trust, not so much, as they say. Takes a little time and effort, okay? So who's this for? This is for somebody who wants something easy, something fast, okay? And as far as rates are concerned, you could actually shop around. You will, in fact, find that many, many charities adopt the payment rates proposed by an organization, the American Council on Charitable Gift Annuities. However, there are some organizations that will give even better, more competitive rates. UJA has a long history of providing much, much better rates than is proposed by ACGA. And that's largely because their pool of annuitants is so large and they do so well with their investment program that they can afford to give better rates. So it's something to think about and be aware of. All right, move on. What if the answer is, I don't need income. I've got all the income I want. My bigger problem is, I'm very successful. I want to do some estate planning. I want to benefit my children in this deal. Can we do that? Now we need to talk about a charitable lead trust. In the end, the charitable lead trust is a backward charitable remainder trust. In a charitable remainder trust, the charity got all the money for X period of time, and whatever is left went to the charity. With the lead trust, we have the exact opposite. We're going to give all the money to the charity at first, and then whatever is left goes to the children. That's the idea. Why do we want to do this? As I said, usually there's an estate planning move, okay? I can structure this deal so that under the tax law, the donation or the gift I make to my children is valued at $0. It's creative math, okay? Very easy to do. But on top of that, let's suppose I set this thing up and I fund it with $250,000, even though the charity doesn't get any money, or at least only gets a part of it each year, I can get a tax write-off for all the money I put into the trust on day one. Not bad. So if I'm a wealthy person and I'm getting ready to sell my business, or I'm going to have a big tax year, and I want to get a big charitable deduction right now, this could be the plan. This could be the strategy. Okay? Lots of ways you can be creative, and these are all very straightforward, things that the law does to promote philanthropy. Okay? Okay. Transparency. This is the one nobody likes. But I will argue this promotes philanthropy. Transparency. Right now, 38 states say, before you go and ask any of our citizens for so much as a nickel, you need to first register with the Charities Bureau. In some states, it's not the Charities Bureau. There'll be some other agency. Florida, being Florida, has you file at the Department of Agriculture. Like I said, it's Florida. Need I say anything more? But you need to register, provide them information on who you are, who your organization is, some financials and so forth. In addition, every year, you need to file annual reports. How much did we raise? Blah, blah, blah. Those reports are largely the same things you send to the IRS, your IRS Form 990. However, this is where we get into the legal requirement for actually having an audit. Okay? For any of you who've had the experience in talking about, well, does our organization need to have an audit? Federal law could care less. Unless you're getting government grants, there's no need for an audit. The reason for an audit is because state fundraising laws will require it. And whether or not you need an audit, it will depend entirely on what states you're raising money and how much you raise. You may be saying to yourself, how in the world is this enhancing philanthropy? Well, lo and behold, this information is all online. So if you're thinking about whether or not I want to make a donation to an organization, you might go online and look them up. Let's see, are they financially sound? Was the fundraiser I was talking to a real slick guy? Did they talk a fast talk? Let's go see the numbers. Prove it. Okay, let's find out if they're for real or if I'm getting had. Let's find out, did they just open up shop yesterday? Or have they been around? Do they have a history? Better still, I still remember when I was running the Donor Advised Fund program, is this an organization that has the same address as 5 other organizations? You may wonder how that could be possible. Trust me, it's amazing how many organizations fit in that category. All right? You can find this information out. It's all online. Look at their tax reports. Better still, if you're really creative and you really want to do your due diligence, maybe you'll find out the organization's address is in the middle of a vacant field. Again, I had that. That was real. I still remember. We had a grant request came in. My team did the due diligence on the organization, checked tax returns, checked addresses, took advantage of my best friend. Do you know who my best friend is? Google. Google, come on. Isn't Google all your friends? Okay. You know what Google told us? The organization, which allegedly was a church, was actually a vacant field. It was interesting findings. Not nearly as interesting as a different church that one day we figured out had the same address as a bar. Interesting religion. I'll leave it to each of you to decide what you want to think, but okay. But all of these bits of information are because the law requires filing, transparency, all sorts of compliance. Many of us who run charities may say, what a pain in the neck. This is costing us money. It's taking money away from our mission. But I would argue, and I do argue this, it also forces you to tell the world who you are and say, look, see, we do the right thing. We follow the rules. Look at the guy over there. He doesn't play by the rules. Don't support them. okay? Look, the philanthropic community, by and large, does great work. It's important work. So we, as part of the philanthropic community, need to also make sure that we look at those who are not doing the right thing and making sure that those organizations are pushed out of the community. Because those organizations only cause problems for ourselves, okay? I still remember Madoff. I remember the day the news broke. I remember getting so many phone calls, it was absolutely obscene how many calls I got, okay? And then a week after, everybody started to ask, okay, we didn't get caught up with this guy, but how are we doing? What are we doing? Are we doing it correctly? Are we thinking things through? Do we have good internal controls to protect ourselves so that when our donors are asking us, because they are, how can we say that we're adhering to our fiduciary duties? Okay? This is important. Additional parts to the fundraising story I want to talk about for a moment, and this is very, very important because I see this come up time and time again, is in addition to the solicitation registration rules, there are also a series of rules that are included in there that regulate fundraisers, the people who are actually going out and raising the money. All right? You may be saying to yourself, wait, me? I raise money for organizations. Yes, you, but not everybody, okay? There are lots and lots of exemptions. The rule basically says that if you go out and raise money and get paid to do it, you're going to be regulated. That's the short story. The long story is that if you're a bona fide employee, the rules don't apply to you. If you're a volunteer, it doesn't apply to you. If you're a lawyer or an accountant, it doesn't apply to you. So who does this apply to? This applies to companies who are hired to go and work with a charity to go raise funds. Okay, not such a big deal. What that means, though, is that if you are hiring a firm like this, you need to ask questions. Are they properly registered? Are they filing reports? And so forth. Okay, we see more and more activity from state attorney generals around this area. It's a hot button issue, particularly if you are fundraising in New York or California, two of the most activist states in the country by far when it comes to enforcement and regulation. I think in this case, California might actually be more heavily regulated than New York. I never thought there'd be a point in my career when I would say that, but I think it's true because even California has now gotten very focused on regulating activities on the internet, all right? And for those of you who might be with firms that facilitate and work with fundraising on the internet, I'm sure you're very familiar with the California platform rules. Enough said, okay? Let's move on. That leads me into peer-to-peer crowdfunding. You may say to yourself now, what has the law got to do with these things? Well, depending upon how you structure your fundraising program, most of those state solicitation rules aren't going to apply to you. What do you mean? Well, let's start off with the first. What the heck is peer-to-peer? What's crowdfunding, right? This is where your charity is going to leverage off your supporters to help raise money for you. So first and foremost, are those supporters your employees? No. Are they your volunteers? Yes. What did I tell you? What's the exception? One of the exceptions is for your volunteers. Excellent. So we don't have professional fundraisers. We don't need to worry about all that. Okay? What do we need to worry about? Well, you need to worry about whether or not and to what extent you're actively, as an organization, involved on a state level in the fundraising activities. That may mean your charity still needs to register, but you certainly don't need to worry as much about what all of your volunteers and supporters are actually doing, okay? It makes your life a lot easier and a lot cheaper because, of course, just like you don't have to have a large staff to run a good peer-to-peer program. You can leverage off of your volunteers as well, and you don't need a large legal bill either to comply. Very powerful way to raise money and very cost-effective. Something to be keeping in mind. Okay, number 9, cause marketing. Very, very powerful strategy. For those of you who are not as familiar with cause marketing, I still remember, seeing these. You still see them all the time. They're very powerful. It's where a brand can line itself up with an organization. Come to Macy's on Friday, shop between 9 and 11, and 5% will go support the Red campaign. Okay? American Cancer Society was probably one of the first major national leaders in this space with its partnership back in the 60s with a little company called YoPlay. Remember that? Mail in the little pink tins, and we're going to donate money. Okay? Komen got heavily involved with it as well. This is cause marketing. Very, very effective. Okay? But just so you know, this is also fairly regulated. Is it as much as all the other stuff? No, not at all. But it's still fairly regulated, and there are certain rules you need to keep in mind. These rules are designed to protect the charities because lots and lots of companies have sought to take advantage of charities. Okay? We see this often. Many times I will get a phone call from an organization. ABC car dealership wants to do a promotion with us next month. What do you think? They're going to donate $500 every time someone buys a car. They've created all this great promotional material for us to send out to all of our donors. I say to myself, so you're now selling cars? You're going to promote it to all your donors. What are they doing? Okay? You got to think about the actual mechanics of the transaction. Okay? Many companies will seek to take advantage of charities with these promotions, but they can become enormously successful. When I hear the phone call that I just described, you know what I usually ask? What's the minimum guarantee? Get a guarantee. At least you know you're spending some time and you're going to get some money out of the deal. It's very worthwhile. All right. Last but not least, make sure we stay on time. Private foundations. I like to say this is for the donor who has everything. Okay? I have it all. But what I really don't have is control. I don't like a donor advised fund because I have to listen to their rules. I want to invest the money my way. I want to create my own family legacy. I want to do all these things. Okay? I want my own charity. Why not? I could be just as big as American Cancer. I could be just as big as Komen. I could be just as big as anyone else. Why not? I'll create my own charity. So for that, we create a private foundation. Once again, just because you should doesn't mean, just because you could doesn't mean you should. All right? This is not for the faint of heart. It requires a lot of work, time, and expense, and a fair number of professionals involved on an ongoing basis. The question people ask me all the time, how much money should there be before I create a foundation? So it depends. Think about it this way. You're going to be paying a lawyer, you're going to pay an IRS filing fee, and you're going to be paying an accountant every year. What makes sense to you? I've had people say, oh, it's got to be at least $5 million. I've had other people set up foundations for $250,000. It's up to you, but you got to think about what makes sense economically in the long run. Once you create it, you're responsible, okay? Yes, the law allows you to do it, but the law will impose all sorts of strict requirements on private foundations. And if you have a misstep, it will be very expensive for you to fix it. So, With all that, what did we talk about? Okay, we talked about 10 ways in which the law promotes philanthropy. There are more. We could talk more. But here's my top 10. We have our outright gifts. We have our donor-advised funds, the lovely QCD. We got the remainder trust. We got charitable gift annuities. We got charitable lead trusts. We have our lovely state registration rules, guaranteeing, or at least attempting to guarantee some transparency. Then, of course, peer-to-peer and crowdfunding, wildly popular. Enormous amounts of money has been raised in recent years through these strategies and tactics. Cause marketing. I could tell you so many funny stories about cause marketing programs. They're a lot of fun. And then, of course, for the person who has everything, why not create your own charity and you'll have your own private foundation. So with that, I hope you all learned something. I hope it's helpful. And I'll be around if anyone has questions. Thank you.
Andrew, God bless you. Thank you so much. You know, while you were talking, many people asked if you'll be